Well, US President Joe Biden marked his first year in office on Thursday and has spent much of that time tackling the many domestic issues that he says weren't addressed by the Trump administration. Chief among them now is runaway record-setting inflation, which is already widening the gap between rich and poor households. The impact can readily be seen with higher prices for everything from food to fuel. And as Frank Usiado reports, more Americans are now lining up at food banks to make ends meet.
Are these extra tomatoes?
Karen DeMarco runs this public food bank out of a church in northern New Jersey.
Bergen County is one of the most affluent counties in the state. And, but 1 in 5 of our kids still go to bed hungry.
The resurgence of the pandemic, the surging Omicron variant, and the record-setting inflation numbers have eaten away the buying power for many Americans.
It's a real bump in the road. It does affect families. When you walk in the grocery store and you're paying more for whatever you're purchasing, it matters.
Core consumer price inflation among advanced economies has risen most sharply in the United States, followed by the United Kingdom and Canada. Here in the U.S., though, the rising energy costs and the cost for food, to put food on your table, have driven people to rely on community food banks like this one in northern New Jersey, even if they have a job.
The middle class just seems to get forgotten.
Dawn from Dumont, New Jersey is just one of the hundreds of people who line up outside the food bank at dusk every week.
I can try to supplement or find another job, and I've been trying, but my husband lost hours as well. So even though he has a job, it becomes more difficult.
Consumer prices climbed 7% in December from a year earlier, the fastest annual pace in 4 decades.
I have 3 kids. I lost my job due to COVID. It's hard to find another one with the outrageous prices of childcare.
Yeah, it's a big help since the COVID, and a lot of people lost their jobs, and it's been a big help, really.
And U.S. officials admit that inflation is likely to be higher for longer than previously thought.
We thought that these supply-side bottlenecks and shortages would be alleviated much more quickly than they have been. So we're not really seeing yet the kind of progress we essentially all forecasters really thought we'd be seeing by now, and that's really what's driving it.
And this means driving to the local food bank for many Americans is what's on the menu for the foreseeable future. Frank Usiado, TRT World, Dumont, New Jersey.
Well, for more on the challenges for the world's largest economy, let's bring in Joann Weiner. She's a professor of applied economics at George Washington University. Welcome back to the program, Professor. Firstly, runaway inflation is a problem. It's no longer just a temporary thing, or at least in the eyes of many economists and other analysts. 7% in December, the highest in almost 4 decades. What does the Biden administration need to do in order to tackle that and to bring prices down?
Yes, it's interesting to see that 3 or 4 months ago, most economists were saying, well, don't worry about inflation. This is just a temporary 1 or 2 months. It'll go back. It's not going to stay high. But now that we've had, as you just mentioned, 7% annual rate, economists and others are starting to get worried about that. What can Biden do about it? There's not a whole lot. Some people are calling for him to take away the tariffs, but that would just be a one-off change. And so that wouldn't necessarily change the rate of price increase. Others might be arguing for wage and price controls. Wages are also going up along with prices, but we know that would just be a temporary halt to price increases. That didn't work decades ago, and it wouldn't work again. There are some longer-term things happening. Intel is building a new factory in the United States, and that should help with the computer chip shortage, but that'll take a while to come online. Helping get the bottlenecks out of the warehouses and the ships, the containers, getting them unloaded, maybe making it easier to become a truck driver. Australia is reducing the age for its long-haul truck drivers. The U.S. is considering that. So those are a few things. But at the moment, I think keeping in mind that although this is a very high level of inflation, 40-some years ago, we had inflation and interest rates that, when added together, were nearly 30%. And that was we're nowhere near that now. It's only at about 10% if you add interest rates to inflation rate. So sit tight.
And you did mention there that officials had previously said that they believed higher prices would just be transitory or temporary, and one of those people was the Fed Chair Jerome Powell. But he's now hinted that perhaps the US Federal Reserve might raise interest rates and tighten other areas of its monetary policy. How effective will that be in terms of bringing down inflation this year, do you think?
Well, typically raising interest rates does help control price increases. That said, with Corona and the coronavirus and the shutdowns, it's very hard to predict what's going to happen in this economy. We've never had one like this before, so I don't envy the Fed and in its attempt to keep inflation under control without knocking the economy off track, which of course is something else to worry about. We don't want to raise interest rates to the extent that it causes economic growth to slow down. So it's a delicate balance, and I believe the Fed though is hoping to keep interest rate increases either at zero for the next year or maybe only have a slight increase over the next few months. They're not taking that risk at the moment.
Okay, Joann Weiner from George Washington University. Always good to get your analysis. Thanks again for joining us.